The cameras flashed relentlessly in the opulent ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in New York City. Coraline Harrington stood behind the mahogany podium, her knuckles white from gripping the edges as the crowd of reporters, shareholders and family members waited for the quarterly update on Harrington Innovations, the sustainable tech giant her family had built over 3 decades. Her heart hammered in her chest as she locked eyes with Marceline Vos standing quietly to the side in a simple but elegant navy dress, her auburn hair catching the light, and in that moment all the years of secrecy, the stolen glances, the whispered promises in hidden corners came crashing down on her. I cannot do this anymore, she thought, and before she could second-guess herself, Coraline leaned into the microphone, her voice steady despite the tremor in her soul. Ladies and gentlemen, before we dive into the financials, there is something I must share with all of you, something that has shaped every decision I have made, and every night I have lain awake wondering if I was living a lie. I am in love with a woman, and that woman is Marceline Vos, the person who has shown me what true courage and authenticity mean. The room erupted in a cacophony of gasps, flashes, and shouted questions as Coraline reached out her hand. Marceline stepped forward, their fingers interlocking in a public declaration that felt both terrifying and liberating. In the front row, her father Victor Harrington's face turned ashen, his conservative values clashing visibly with the scene, while her mother Eleanor clutched her pearls, her eyes wide with disbelief, and her sister Lydia smirked, a calculating glint in her eye. Within minutes, the live broadcast had the news wires buzzing, and the stock ticker for Harrington Innovations began its precipitous drop from $120 per share down to 98 in mere minutes, as conservative investors panicked and sold off shares en masse. Coraline felt the weight of her decision immediately, the price of truth starting to manifest in the digital numbers scrolling behind her. But she stood tall, her grip on Marceline's hand tightening as security began to usher them away from the podium amid the chaos. As they made their way to the private elevator, Coraline turned to Marceline, her voice low and urgent. I am sorry for springing this on you, but I could not bear the lies any longer, the fake smiles at family dinners, the fear of being discovered. Marceline nodded, though her eyes showed a mix of love and apprehension. I understand, Coraline, but this is going to change everything for both of us, our families, the company, the whole world is watching now. Back in the family suite upstairs, the confrontation began almost immediately. Victor burst in, slamming the door, his voice booming. What in God's name have you done, Coraline? Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation, our business, the legacy your grandfather built on hard work and traditional values? This is not just your life, it is our livelihood. Eleanor followed, tears in her eyes. Darling, please tell me this is a phase or a publicity stunt. We can fix this, we have PR people for a reason. Lydia hung back, arms crossed, a small smile playing on her lips as she checked her phone, already seeing the stock plunge reflected in the family group chat. Coraline felt the inner conflict tear at her, the duty to family, the fear of losing the company she had poured her soul into versus the freedom of finally being herself with the woman she loved more than anything. She had grown up in the shadow of expectation, the perfect daughter, the heir who would marry Richard, the suitable match from another prominent family to strengthen alliances. But meeting Marceline 2 years ago at a secret industry conference where Marceline was presenting on innovative green materials had changed all that. Their connection was instant, deep and undeniable, built on late-night conversations, shared dreams, and a bond that transcended the social barriers. Now, as the numbers kept falling, Coraline wondered if she had just destroyed everything she had worked for. But looking at Marceline, she knew the alternative was a life of quiet desperation. The night stretched on with phone calls from board members demanding explanations and lawyers advising damage control, but Coraline refused to back down, her resolve hardening with every accusation. Marceline stayed by her side, offering quiet strength, but Coraline could see the toll it was taking on her too, the woman who had always preferred the shadows now thrust into the spotlight. By midnight, the stock had stabilized at a loss of 20%. But the real storm was just beginning as social media exploded with opinions ranging from support to outright condemnation. Coraline lay awake beside Marceline in the hotel bed, her mind racing with the consequences of her choice, the family pressure mounting, the societal prejudice she knew would follow, and the moral dilemma of whether her personal happiness justified the potential ruin of hundreds of employees' livelihoods. Yet in that darkness, a small spark of awakening flickered. She had taken the first step toward authenticity, and no matter the cost, she would not retreat. The morning light filtered through the heavy curtains of the hotel suite as Coraline woke to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly with notifications. The headlines were everywhere: Coraline Harrington's shocking confession rocks family empire, stocks tumble on scandal. She scrolled through the articles, her stomach twisting at the harsh words, some calling her selfish, others praising her bravery. Marceline was already up making coffee, her face pale from lack of sleep. "We need to talk to my parents today," Coraline said, but Marceline shook her head. "My family is in Chicago. They saw the news on TV last night. My mother cried. My father hung up on me." The betrayal felt fresh, but Coraline knew her own family was waiting downstairs for the emergency meeting. When they entered the private conference room, Victor was pacing. Eleanor sat with tissues in hand, and Lydia was on her laptop typing furiously. "This is a disaster," Victor shouted. "The board is calling for your resignation." "Coraline, how could you be so reckless?" Eleanor pleaded. "Darling, think of the employees, the contracts we have with traditional clients. They are pulling out already." Lydia chimed in with feigned concern. "Perhaps it is best if I take over the public relations for now to stabilize the situation." Coraline felt the pressure mounting, her inner voice screaming that this was her life, her choice, but the guilt over the employees and the family legacy weighed heavy. She defended her decision passionately, explaining that hiding had been killing her slowly, that Marceline had brought light into her life. But the family saw it as betrayal, the moral dilemma clear in their eyes: duty versus self. As the meeting dragged on, Coraline realized the societal prejudice was not just external but deeply rooted in her own home. Marceline waited outside, supporting from afar, but the strain was visible in her eyes when they reunited later. The day was filled with more confrontations, phone calls from investors threatening to withdraw, and media requests for interviews. Coraline made the decision to stand firm, refusing to issue a retraction despite the mounting losses, now at 35%. The internal conflict raged. She questioned if her awakening was worth the pain she was causing, but every time she looked at Marceline, she knew the answer was yes. Yet the road ahead was fraught with more betrayals and tough choices that would test their bond to the limit. The days blurred into a whirlwind of damage control meetings and sleepless nights, as the stock continued its free fall, settling at $65 by the end of the week. Coraline sat in the boardroom of Harrington Innovations headquarters overlooking the Hudson River, her hands folded tightly in her lap, while the directors grilled her on the fallout. One older board member, a longtime friend of her father, slammed his fist on the table. "Your personal life is your business, Coraline, but dragging it into the company spotlight has cost us millions in lost contracts and investor confidence. How do you plan to fix this?" Coraline met his gaze, her voice calm but laced with steel. "By being honest for the first time in my life, and by leading this company into the future with the same authenticity that built it." The room fell silent, but the tension crackled like electricity. Later that afternoon, in the privacy of her corner office, Coraline stared at the framed photo of her grandfather, the man who had founded the company on principles of hard work and family unity. She felt the weight of his legacy pressing down. The moral dilemma gnawing at her core was her love for Marceline worth potentially dismantling the empire that employed over 2,000 people. Marceline arrived unannounced, carrying takeout from their favorite Thai place, her presence a brief oasis in the storm. They ate in silence at first until Marceline spoke softly. "I have been getting death threats online, Coraline, people calling me a homewrecker, a gold digger. My own sister texted me to say I ruined the family name." Coraline reached across the desk, taking her hand. "I never wanted this for you, but hiding was destroying us both." The betrayal came swiftly the next morning when a tabloid published leaked emails suggesting Coraline had been in therapy for identity issues years ago. The source was anonymous, but Coraline knew deep down it was Lydia, her sister's ambition finally surfacing in the worst way. Confronting her in the family townhouse that evening, Coraline demanded answers. "Why, Lydia, why turn on me now?" Lydia shrugged, a cold smile on her face. "Because you handed me the perfect opportunity to show the board who the real leader is, someone who puts the company first, not her own desires." Victor stood by, silent, his disappointment a palpable force, while Eleanor tried to mediate, her voice breaking. "Girls, please, this is tearing us apart." Coraline felt the inner fracture deep in the family she had fought so hard to please, now fracturing under the pressure of her truth. That night back in the apartment she shared secretly with Marceline for the past year, Coraline broke down for the first time, the tears flowing as she questioned every choice. Marceline held her, whispering words of strength, but Coraline could see the toll on her partner too, the woman who had sacrificed her own privacy and career momentum to stand by her side. The societal backlash intensified, protests outside the company gates from conservative groups, while supportive messages poured in from unexpected corners, young employees and online communities. Coraline made the tough decision to address the staff directly in a town hall meeting. Standing on the factory floor, she spoke from the heart about integrity and inclusion, the price she was paying in lost family trust, but the gain in personal freedom. The employees' reactions were mixed. Some applauded, others walked out in protest, the division mirroring the nation's own divides. As the week ended, the stock hit a new low at $52, investors fleeing in droves, but Coraline refused to waver, her resolve tested but unbroken. The moral trade-off loomed large. Was she selfish for choosing love? Or was the real selfishness in perpetuating a lie that benefited no one in the end? Marceline faced her own awakening in quiet moments, admitting she had always feared the spotlight, but now saw the power in visibility, even as it cost her relationships and peace of mind. The confrontation with Victor escalated when he arrived unannounced at their apartment, demanding Coraline sign papers to step down as CEO temporarily. She refused, standing firm beside Marceline, the act of defiance, a turning point that left her father storming out with a final warning. "You will regret this, daughter. The price will be higher than you know." Coraline closed the door, her heart aching but her spirit awakening to the truth that some battles were worth every scar. The coming weeks would bring more tests, more betrayals, and the first hints that the storm might yet yield unexpected light. Flashbacks flooded Coraline during the quiet hours before dawn 2 years earlier at that industry conference in Chicago, where she first locked eyes with Marceline across a crowded panel on sustainable materials. Marceline had spoken with such passion about innovation born from necessity, her working-class roots fueling ideas that challenged the old guard. Coraline had approached her afterward, their conversation flowing effortlessly into dinner, and then late-night walks along the lakefront where secrets began to spill. Those early months were stolen moments, hidden dinners in small towns, weekend getaways under false names, the thrill of connection mixed with the constant fear of discovery. Now in the present, the memories served as fuel as Coraline prepared for the board vote that could strip her of control. The meeting was held in the glass-walled conference room on the 45th floor. The city sprawled below like an indifferent witness. Lydia presented her case, first highlighting the stock losses, the lost contracts, and the need for stable leadership, painting Coraline as reckless. Coraline countered with data on how authenticity could attract new talent and markets, but the director's eyes were skeptical, the prejudice subtle, but clear in their questions about her judgment. Marceline waited in the lobby afterward, her hands trembling, as she read the latest hate comments online. When Coraline emerged defeated but not broken, they walked the streets of Manhattan in silence until Marceline stopped under a streetlight. "I love you, Coraline, but I never asked for this spotlight. It is costing me, my family, my safety." Coraline pulled her into an embrace, the public risk now irrelevant. "I know and I am sorry, but turning back would betray everything we built together." The betrayal deepened when Lydia leaked private photos from Coraline and Marceline's early dates. The images splashed across gossip sites with captions questioning the company's stability. The family dinner that followed was a battlefield, Victor disowning her in words that cut like knives. "You are no longer welcome in this house until you fix this mess." Eleanor wept silently, her torn loyalty a visible wound, while Lydia watched with satisfaction. Coraline left the table, her head high, but inside the turmoil raged the moral dilemma of loyalty to blood versus loyalty to self. In the following days, Coraline faced employee walkouts and supplier pullouts, the company hemorrhaging value daily. She spent hours in strategy sessions with her remaining allies, drafting a new vision statement that embraced diversity, but the effort felt hollow against the personal cost. Marceline, meanwhile, dealt with her own confrontations, a call from her mother in Chicago begging her to end the relationship and return home, the societal pressure from her conservative upbringing mirroring Coraline's own. The two women supported each other through long talks late into the night, exploring the depths of their commitment, the trade-offs they had made, and the awakening that came from standing in their truth despite the isolation. One evening, after a particularly brutal media interview, Coraline collapsed on the couch exhausted. Marceline knelt beside her. "We are paying the price, but look at the people who are reaching out, the young engineers who say your courage inspired them to come out at work. It is not all loss." Coraline nodded, the spark growing brighter amid the darkness. Yet the board vote loomed, and with it the possibility of losing everything she had fought for. The inner conflict reached a peak as she prepared her statement, weighing the rightness of her actions against the tangible harm to the family empire. Lydia's betrayal had forced her to see the fractures in the family foundation, cracks that had existed long before her confession but now exposed for all to see. As the week closed, Coraline made a pivotal decision to fight for her position, not just for herself, but for the future she envisioned with Marceline by her side, a future built on honesty, even if it meant walking through fire. The protests outside headquarters grew larger each day, conservative groups chanting against what they called moral decay, while counter-demonstrators held signs of support. The divide, a microcosm of the nation's struggles. Coraline watched from her office window, the scene fueling her determination, but also her doubts. Inside the building, morale was fractured, some employees avoiding her gaze, others offering quiet nods of solidarity. The moral dilemmas multiplied when a major client, a traditional energy firm, canceled a multi-million-dollar contract citing values misalignment. Coraline called an emergency meeting with her team, laying out the harsh realities. We lose this and we lose jobs, but if we compromise who we are, we lose our soul. The team debated heatedly, some arguing for a retraction to save the company, others backing her stance, the room thick with tension. Marceline joined the discussion, her insights on public perception sharp and valuable, though the exposure had left her drained. Later that night in their apartment, the conversation turned personal. Marceline confessed the depth of her fear. I have lost friends, Coraline, people I thought would stand by me. My brother called me a disgrace. Coraline listened, her own heart heavy with the knowledge that her choice had ripple effects far beyond the stock price. The betrayal escalated when Lydia publicly distanced herself in a television interview, claiming the family was in shock and working to restore stability, the implication clear that Coraline was the problem. The confrontation came the next day in the lobby of the building, Coraline blocking her sister's path. How can you smile for the cameras while stabbing me in the back? Lydia laughed bitterly. You did this to yourself, Coraline, always the golden child, now the fallen one. I am just protecting what is mine. The exchange left Coraline reeling, the family rift now a chasm that seemed unbridgeable. Eleanor reached out in private, pleading for a compromise, a quiet retraction to save the legacy. But Coraline refused, the decision costing her the last threads of maternal approval. The psychological toll mounted, Coraline spending hours journaling her thoughts, the pages filled with questions of right and wrong, the price of authenticity measured in lost relationships and financial ruin. Marceline faced her own inner battles, retreating into work on her secret project, a revolutionary battery technology she had been developing in her spare time, the one she had shared only with Coraline. The societal prejudice hit hardest when Marceline was doxed online, her address and past leaked, forcing them to move to a secure location, the invasion a stark reminder of the cost. Yet in the midst of the chaos, small victories emerged, supportive emails from employees who had come out inspired by Coraline and media pieces that began to shift the narrative toward empowerment. Coraline made the decision to double down, announcing a new diversity initiative despite the board's warnings, the act a deliberate trade-off of short-term stability for long-term vision. The internal awakening grew as she realized the family pressure had always been a cage, now broken, but the freedom came with scars. Marceline too found strength in the struggle, her love for Coraline deepening through the shared trials. As the stock hovered at its lowest, the two women faced the possibility of starting over, the ultimate test of their bond. The coming board meeting would decide Coraline's fate, and with it the future of the company she loved almost as much as the woman beside her. Through it all, the moral questions persisted. Was the pain inflicted on family and employees justified by the personal truth? Or had the choice crossed a line from courage to selfishness? The answers remained elusive, but the path forward was clear, no turning back. The board meeting arrived under a cloud of uncertainty, the directors seated around the long table, their faces a mix of judgment and calculation. Coraline presented her case with data on emerging markets and the potential for growth through authenticity, the words flowing from a place of deep conviction. Lydia countered with projections of further losses, her voice smooth, but her eyes revealing the ambition that drove her. The vote was close, but Coraline retained her position by a narrow margin, the victory bittersweet as it came with conditions, stricter oversight, and a demand for damage control. Walking out, Marceline waited with open arms, the embrace a moment of pure relief amid the exhaustion. Yet the crisis was far from over, the stock still languishing and the family ties in tatters. In the following days, Coraline dove into damage control meetings with remaining investors, her explanations honest and unapologetic, the moral stance a double-edged sword that both repelled and attracted. Marceline worked tirelessly on her project, the battery technology that could revolutionize the industry, the one she had kept secret to avoid family interference. One evening she revealed the full scope to Coraline, the prototypes, the patents, the potential to save the company. This could be the key, Coraline said, the spark of hope igniting. The low point came when Victor suffered a mild health scare, the stress of the scandal cited by doctors, the news hitting Coraline like a physical blow, the guilt a heavy chain. She visited him in the hospital, the conversation stilted but revealing his pain at the fractured family. "You were my hope for the future," he said, "but now I see only division." Coraline left with tears, the trade-off of love and truth costing her the father's approval she had craved all her life. Marceline supported her through the darkness, her own family having cut contact, the parallel struggles binding them closer. The societal prejudice continued in subtle ways, clients hesitating, suppliers questioning, but also an unexpected support from younger generations, the online movement gaining traction. Coraline made the decision to go public with Marceline's project, tying it to the company's new direction. The announcement, a calculated risk that could either sink them or save them. The inner awakening reached its peak during a quiet weekend away in the Hamptons, the two women walking the beach discussing the prices paid, the betrayals endured, and the growth that came from it. "I do not regret it," Coraline said, "but I mourn what was lost." Marceline nodded the same. The board grew restless, demanding results, the pressure mounting as the stock dipped again. Coraline faced another confrontation with Lydia in the hallway, the sister's words sharp but Coraline standing firm, the dynamic shifted by her unyielding stance. As the month closed, the first signs of recovery appeared, small investor buys, and media pieces highlighting the courage, the tide slowly turning. Yet the ultimate test loomed, the full unveiling of Marceline's technology and the reaction it would provoke. The moral dilemmas remained: was the initial chaos a necessary price for progress, or had the personal choices inflicted unnecessary harm? Coraline and Marceline faced the future together, their bond forged in fire, stronger than the forces trying to break it. The press conference to unveil Marceline's battery technology was held in the same ballroom where the confession had begun, the irony not lost on anyone. Coraline stood at the podium once more, Marceline beside her, this time by design, the presentation detailing the breakthrough that promised cleaner energy at lower costs. The room filled with reporters and investors, the atmosphere electric as questions flew. The stock began to move, almost immediately climbing, as analysts grasped the potential, the unexpected surge no one had foreseen, rooted in the viral authenticity of Coraline's earlier stand, which had drawn ethical investors seeking leaders with integrity. The reason no one expected was the way the story had humanized the company, attracting a consortium of progressive funds and government grants previously unavailable due to the old conservative image, the publicity transforming scandal into a narrative of bold leadership and innovation. Within hours, the stock soared past $150, surpassing its pre-confession high, the rebound fueled by new partnerships and a wave of positive media that celebrated the couple's courage. Victor watched from the sidelines, his expression softening slightly as the numbers rolled in. Eleanor beside him, tears of relief mixed with lingering hurt. Lydia sat in the back, her plans thwarted but the family rift beginning to show faint signs of healing through shared pride in the breakthrough. Coraline and Marceline fielded questions together, their hands occasionally brushing in quiet affirmation, the romantic moment subtle but powerful amid the corporate triumph. In the weeks that followed, the company thrived, new talent flocking and contracts multiplying, the awakening complete, as Coraline realized the price paid had paved the way for a stronger future. Marceline's family slowly reached out, tentative steps toward reconciliation, while Victor admitted in a private talk that the change, though painful, had forced growth. The employees who had stayed felt empowered, the societal prejudice still present but countered by the visible success. Coraline reflected on the journey, the confrontations, the betrayals, the trade-offs, and the inner conflicts that had shaped her into a leader unafraid of truth. Marceline stood as her equal, their love the foundation that withstood every storm. As they stood on the balcony of their new home, overlooking the city lights, Coraline turned to her. "We paid dearly, but look what we built." Marceline smiled the same. In the end, as the stock soared and the company entered a new era of growth, Coraline sat with Marceline looking at the city skyline, wondering if the pain was worth the gain. Did Coraline do the right thing by choosing love and honesty over family tradition and business stability, or was the cost in broken relationships and initial chaos too high a price for the eventual triumph?